The laughter started before she even reached the table. It was loud, cruel, the kind of laughter that made everyone in the village turn their heads. She stood quietly at the edge of the dusty compound, holding a small basket in one hand. She had come alone. And that was exactly what they found funny. A group of men stood around an old wooden table beneath the afternoon sun. Their clothes were dusty, their arms muscular from years of hard labor, and their voices filled the compound with confidence. At the center of them all sat the man everyone called the leader. He was the strongest man there. Nobody challenged him. Nobody even joked about challenging him. He had won every arm wrestling contest the village had held for years. And today, he was surrounded by men who were eager to see him win again. Then she walked into the compound. The laughter changed direction. One of the men looked at her and grinned. Look who has finally arrived. Another man laughed. Did you come to watch the real men compete? She ignored them. She walked toward the table. The leader looked at her. He didn't laugh. He simply watched. She stopped beside him. I brought you something. She placed the small basket on the table. Inside were a few pieces of bread and a bottle of Fanta. The men burst into laughter. One slapped the table. Bread. Another pointed at the bottle. She brought him a drink. Someone behind them shouted. Maybe she thinks he's still a child. More laughter. She lowered her eyes for a moment. But she didn't leave. Instead, she looked at the leader. Eat before you continue. The leader looked at the bread. Then at her. You brought this for me? She nodded. Yes. He picked up the bottle. The laughter slowly became quieter. Because something about the way she looked at him wasn't normal. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply cared about him. The leader took a sip. Then he placed the bottle down. One of the men shook his head. You are really going to let your woman feed you like this? The leader gave him a cold look. The man immediately stopped laughing. But another man wasn't finished. He looked at the woman. You know what your problem is? She said nothing. You think being close to a strong man makes you strong. A few men laughed again. She finally looked at him. No. The man smiled. Then what makes you strong? She answered quietly, knowing when to stay quiet. The compound went silent for a second. Then the laughter returned. But this time, even the leader smiled. The man who had spoken stepped forward. You think you're clever? She didn't answer. He pointed toward the table. Sit down. She looked at the table. Why? Let's see how strong you really are. The leader raised an eyebrow. The men gathered around. The woman shook her head. I didn't come here to compete. Of course you didn't. The man laughed. You came here to carry bread. The crowd laughed again. She turned to leave. Then the leader spoke. Wait. She stopped. He stood. The entire atmosphere changed. He walked toward the table. Sit. She looked at him. You want me to arm wrestle? He nodded. The men immediately started shouting. Yes. Let's see. She won't last 5 seconds. The leader pulled a chair out. Sit down. She slowly sat. The leader took the opposite chair. He placed his elbow on the table. The men crowded around them. One man began clearing the table. Another shouted, Make room. Someone started taking bets. The woman looked at the leader. Why are you doing this? He smiled. Because you came here without fear. She frowned. I don't understand. You walked into a compound full of men who wanted you to feel small. He leaned closer. And you still stood there. The woman looked at his hand. Then she placed hers against his. The difference was obvious. His hand was enormous. Her fingers barely wrapped around his. The crowd exploded with laughter. One man shouted, This will be over before the sun moves. Another shouted, Don't hurt her. The leader smiled. But the woman remained calm. Their hands locked. The leader looked directly into her eyes. Ready? She nodded. Ready. A man standing behind them raised his hand. 3. The crowd screamed. 2. The woman took one slow breath. 1. The match began. The leader pushed. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. Still nothing. The laughter disappeared. His smile faded. The woman's arm didn't move. She sat completely still. The leader looked at their hands. Then at her. He increased the pressure. His muscles tightened. Veins appeared along his forearm. The crowd went silent. One man whispered, "What is happening?" The leader pushed again. The woman's elbow stayed planted. She looked at him calmly. "Are you finished?" His eyes widened. The crowd erupted. "Push. Come on. Don't let her win." The leader gritted his teeth. He used both his strength and his technique. Slowly he began forcing her hand downward. For the first time her arm moved. The crowd screamed, "She is losing." But the woman smiled. Then something changed. She shifted her wrist. The leader suddenly felt his advantage disappear. His eyes widened. She pushed back. Hard. His arm began moving upward. The crowd went completely silent. The leader tried to stop her. He couldn't. The woman continued pushing. His hand moved closer to the table. Closer. Closer. Then, bang! His hand hit the wooden surface. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. The leader stared at his own hand. Then he slowly looked at her. She released his hand. She stood and picked up the basket. One of the men finally spoke. "No way." Another shook his head. "That wasn't possible." The leader remained seated. He looked at the woman. "Where did you learn that?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "From my father." The leader frowned. "Your father?" She nodded. "He taught me when I was young." One of the older men in the crowd suddenly stepped forward. He stared at her face, then at her arm, then back at her face. "Wait." Everyone turned toward him. The old man looked frightened. "I know that technique." The woman turned. The old man swallowed. "Who was your father?" She hesitated. Then she gave him the name. The old man's face changed completely. The laughter was gone. The confidence was gone. He took a step backward. "No." The leader stood. "What?" The old man looked at him. "You don't know who you just challenged." The leader looked at the woman. "Who are you?" She said nothing. The old man continued. Her father was not an ordinary man. Everyone listened. He was one of the greatest fighters this region had ever known. The leader's expression changed. "He died years ago." The woman lowered her head. "Yes." The old man looked at her. "And before he died, he taught you everything?" She nodded. The leader slowly sat down. For the first time in years, nobody in the compound knew what to say. But the story didn't end there. Because the arm wrestling match had revealed something much bigger. The woman wasn't simply strong. She had been hiding her strength for a reason. She had grown up watching people judge others by what they could see. Her father had taught her one lesson repeatedly. Never show people everything you have just because they demand proof. She had remembered those words her entire life. That was why she had never bragged. That was why she had never challenged anyone. And that was why she had allowed the men to laugh. Until the leader challenged her. The leader finally stood again. He walked toward her. Everyone expected him to be angry. Instead, he stopped in front of her and lowered his head slightly. "You beat me." She smiled. "I know." A few men laughed nervously. The leader looked at the crowd. "And all of you laughed at her." Nobody answered. He picked up the basket she had brought. He held the bread in his hand. Then he looked at the men. "You laughed because she brought me bread." He raised the bottle of Fanta. "You laughed because she cared enough to bring me something to eat." He put the bottle down. But not one of you noticed what she was carrying inside her. The men lowered their eyes. The leader turned toward the woman. "You have my respect." She nodded. Then she started walking away. But before she reached the gate, one of the younger men called out, "Wait." She stopped. He approached cautiously. "Can you teach me that technique?" The entire compound erupted in laughter. Even the leader laughed. The woman turned around. She smiled. "Maybe." The young man grinned. "Really?" She nodded. "But first." She pointed toward the table. "You have to bring the bread." Everyone laughed. And this time the laughter wasn't cruel. It was different. It was the sound of people who had finally learned a lesson. Because sometimes the person everyone mocks is not weak. Sometimes they're simply quiet. Sometimes the person carrying the cheapest bread is carrying the greatest strength in the entire room. And sometimes, all it takes is one challenge to reveal who they really are.